There is a man in this story who never fired a single bullet, never stormed a beach, never set foot on a battlefield in his entire life, and yet Adolf Hitler personally awarded him the Iron Cross, one of the highest honors in the Third Reich, while the King of England secretly awarded him the MBE for services that may have changed the outcome of the Second World War. 2 enemies, 2 medals, 1 man. And the most insane part of this story is not the medals themselves, but what he used to earn them. A tourist map, a railway timetable, and an imagination twisted enough to convince the most feared intelligence service in Europe that an entire spy network existed inside Britain when, in truth, not a single one of those agents was real. His name was Juan Pujol García. History remembers him by his code name, Garbo, because, as one British officer said, he was simply the best actor in the world. Our story begins in Madrid in 1941, in a Europe already drowning in smoke and blood. Juan Pujol García was nobody. A failed poultry farmer with no military background, no espionage training, and no connections of any value to anyone fighting this war. But he carried something far more dangerous than skill. He carried conviction, a deep and personal hatred of fascism, and a plan so reckless it bordered on madness. He decided on his own, with no one asking him to, that he would become a spy for the Allies. He walked into the British embassy and offered his services. They refused him. He came back. They refused him again. Most men would have given up. Pujol did something almost nobody else would have dared. If the British would not have him, he would force their hand by becoming valuable to their enemy first. He approached the Germans in Madrid, posing as a fanatical Nazi sympathizer eager to serve the Reich, and the Abwehr, German military intelligence, recruited him almost instantly. They handed him invisible ink, a cipher, some money, and a single mission: travel to London, build a network of agents, and report everything back to Berlin. There was only one problem. Juan Pujol García had never been to London in his life. He never went. Instead, he quietly relocated to Lisbon, rented a small room, and armed himself with nothing but a blue guide tourist map of Britain, a train timetable, and a French dictionary. From that room, he built an entire phantom war. He invented streets he had never walked. He invented troop movements pulled from nowhere but his own mind. And then, one by one, he invented people. A bitter Welsh nationalist, a disillusioned RAF officer, a Venezuelan businessman with loose lips, 27 fictional agents, 27 fabricated lives, all of them reporting only to him. None of them existed. All of them were believed. In Berlin, the Abwehr read his reports with growing excitement, convinced they had planted their finest operative deep inside British territory. They had no idea their prize spy had never left a rented room in Lisbon, but across the English Channel, something extraordinary was happening. British code breakers at Bletchley Park began intercepting German communications, praising a mysterious, highly effective spy ring operating inside Britain, feeding Berlin alarming, detailed intelligence. There was a catastrophic problem. That spy ring did not exist. MI5 launched a desperate search for an enemy network bleeding secrets from within their own borders, and found nothing because there was nothing real to find. Eventually, through painstaking detective work, the truth surfaced, and it was almost too strange to believe. The man behind this phantom network was the very same man who had been trying for months to offer his services to the British. MI5 finally brought him to London, and in one of the most remarkable reversals in intelligence history, the men who had rejected him now realized they were holding the most valuable deception asset of the entire war. They gave him a new name: Garbo. Operation Garbo began, and from this point forward, every fabricated report would pass through British hands first, transforming his imaginary spies into precision instruments of psychological warfare aimed directly at the heart of the Third Reich, without Berlin ever suspecting the switch had occurred. By 1944, Garbo's deception had become something far larger than himself. The Allies were preparing the largest amphibious invasion in human history, and if German panzer divisions reached the Normandy coast in time, the landing could be slaughtered before it ever truly began. There was only one way to prevent that: convince Hitler. The real invasion was happening somewhere else entirely. Through his network of imaginary agents, Garbo began feeding Berlin a meticulously detailed story of a second, larger invasion force gathering far from Normandy, aimed instead at Pas-de-Calais. The deception was so layered, so convincing, that German high command became fixated on it. Then, in the final hours before the Normandy landings, Garbo sent an urgent message to his German handlers, warning that the invasion was beginning, but insisting with total conviction that Normandy was merely a diversion and the true assault was still coming at Calais. Hitler believed him. While Allied soldiers bled and died on the beaches of Normandy, an entire German army sat frozen at Pas-de-Calais, waiting for an invasion that would never arrive, held in place by the words of a man who had never held a weapon in his life. When the war ended, Juan Pujol García faced a new and terrifying threat: Nazi loyalists seeking revenge against the man who had helped destroy them. So he disappeared. He staged his own death, a quiet and convincing story of illness in Angola, with no body and no witnesses. And the world believed the great deceiver was gone. He was not. He resurfaced in Venezuela under a new identity, living an unremarkable life as a humble bookstore owner, selling novels to strangers who had no idea they were speaking to the man who once held the fate of D-Day in his hands. For nearly 4 decades, he lived in total silence, until 1984, when he finally returned to England to be honored for what he had done, before vanishing once more into the quiet life he had built for himself, until his death in 1988. Juan Pujol García fooled the Nazis with a tourist map, and he fooled the entire world for 40 years with a single perfect lie about his own death. Perhaps that was always his greatest talent, not deception itself, but disappearing so completely that even history almost forgot he was real.